Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Hash, where we bring you the latest and greatest in crypto and culture. My name is Naomi Brockwell, and on the show today, we have Ben Powers, Jen Sanasie, Zack Seward, and filling in for Will Foxley, we have Nate DiCamillo. Welcome back, Nate. It's always a joy to have you on the show. But we're going to start off by talking about big backers like Peter Thiel investing in interesting things. Zack, what's going on there?
Sing it, Naomi. We finally know what Block.one is going to do with all its Bitcoin. Announced today, they are going to fund a subsidiary known as Bullish Global that's going to focus on the exchange space, built on the EOS blockchain and looking to bring some DeFi functionality to what had traditionally been the realm of centralized exchanges. Now, this 10 billion number is really interesting because it's $100 million USD and a boatload of Bitcoin being committed to this project by Block.one. Block.one, of course, famous for raising $4 billion in the ICO era to build the software that ran the EOS blockchain. I'm going to kick this over to Naomi. Naomi, there seems to be appetite for more exchanges, and this is a big number from some big names. And I'm actually quite interested to see this development from Block.one. What's your take?
For sure. I mean, it is interesting seeing all this money being invested in exchanges because honestly, I think they're on the way out. I just see such a surge in decentralized exchanges that I think that, it's really going to eat into the profit margins of these. Obviously, there's always going to be a place for centralized exchanges because of, things like friction and liquidity and all of that. It tends to be better in centralized ones, but the tech is getting better. You're getting, cooler and cooler stuff out there in the decentralized space. It's not like the old days where the only way you could do something decentralized across chain was like BISC and it was peer-to-peer and awkward and there's like no liquidity there. There are real robust systems being built right now, and I think that they're going to get better and better. So I am interested to see what happens when you have these, juggernauts fighting each other, one of them controlled by like the mass population and the other, big VC-backed ventures. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
This could be the clearest example of this CDeFi phenomenon that we've been hearing a little bit about. I think they're trying to sort of harness the power of DeFi, put it on the EOS blockchain, and make an exchange that has liquidity and all sorts of functionality for end users. I just want to break down how this $10 billion figure adds up, because the investment is seeded from Block.one, 100 million USD, again, 164,000 Bitcoin, and 20 million EOS tokens. So this is how that $10 billion figure gets made. I'm going to throw this to Nate. I think this, I'll throw this to Jen, actually. So Jen, CDeFi, this is a big bet on that, bringing the best of both worlds into one thing known as Bullish Global. What are your thoughts?
Well, Zack, I was actually going to ask you a question. We're talking about another exchange, and I'm always saying, do we need more NFT platforms? And when I was reading the story, I was thinking, do we need more exchanges? And with all these exchanges hitting the market, what do people need to consider when choosing which one is the right one for them?
Good question. I think, ease of use is something that's important, I think. Also, some of these exchanges exist in their own blockchain universes. So like, hey, if I have Ethereum assets, I'm eager to go on to Uniswap, a decentralized exchange on that network to do my financial business. If I have other assets in the Binance ecosystem, hey, maybe the Binance Smart Chain or Pancake Swap is where I want to go. We talk about this idea of interoperability, but it's still only getting there in fits and starts. So being able to work within an ecosystem that you already have a little bit of skin in that game, I think that's where people are sort of making their decisions right now as they look to use some of this functionality that these exchanges can offer. I'm going to throw this to Nate. We got Peter Thiel here, we got Mike Novogratz here. These are some mainstream titans of finance. What's your take on this new Block.one endeavor?
Yeah, no, I think some pretty big bags behind this. But one of the things that I do think it kind of signals the fact that there may be still some room for exchanges is just the fact that you see exchanges like Coinbase with such high fees, like still they do incredibly well. Like the fees, like they're still not like it rates to zero for fees. So I think there's still room for like kind of competitors to come in, especially like you said, Zack, with a DeFi, CeFi kind of mix. Yeah, and also customer support. Like we still have a lot of the main exchanges will have issues with customer support. So there's still, I think, a desire to kind of figure out between CeFi and DeFi, what's going to work, what's going to be the easiest to use, what's going to be the cheapest to use. So I think there's still room in the exchange space, and I'm excited to see kind of how they mix automated and centralized products.
Yeah, I want to stick with you, Nate, because that really reminded me of, I know you were talking to some analysts around the Coinbase listing and this race to zero like we see in like traditional finance brokerage apps, right? Coinbase can still command, multiple dollars per trade because the competition for those fees is not quite there yet. And then if you use like a decentralized exchange, you're sort of at the whims of whatever the Ethereum gas fees are at that point in time. So yeah, do you think that like those analysts that you had spoken to for Coinbase would be like, oh yeah, there's plenty of room in this market for, some big players to hop in as well? Was that kind of the takeaway from what you were saying?
Yeah, I think so, because Coinbase does fine. And when they talk about the risks of DeFi, they very much, and decentralized exchanges, they talk about it as still a future oriented thing for them. People still want kind of the usability and the kind of easy interface that the little bit more centralized exchanges offer.
Yeah, I did a quick glance at the price chart, and the EOS token is pumping about 75% on this news because it will be built on the EOS blockchain. Naomi, I saw your hand go up. What do you got?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, because Dan Larimer left the project just a few months ago, and that was kind of a really surprising move, especially because if you've been reading his blogs on Voice for a while, he's just really digging into the decentralized social media, and Voice obviously was a big player there. And it really seemed like he was just really passionate about building that out. And then suddenly he leaves and does this decentralized social media project elsewhere, and Block.one kind of pivots. Now they're doing exchanges, and Voice.com is, pivoting as well. So it's very interesting to see this transition of Block.one now that Dan Larimer has left. I'm actually a big fan of Larimer. So Voice.com has apparently pivoted to NFTs. I got a surprise today when I logged on and a little hat tip from Zack, Seward, a great reporter at CoinDesk. I logged on and it's like NFT platform. And yeah, I was a little bit shocked because Voice.com, it really did have a lot of promise in terms of having, decentralized network. But then Larimer started to write these cryptic posts where he's like, every centralized player is going to be subject to censorship. It kind of suggested that, Voice.com was not robust, like built against this. And so he wanted to find something that was even more robust, like make it even more decentralized. So now he's gone in that direction. Block.one's gone in this other direction, looking at exchanges. It's just a very interesting divergence there.
It really is a pretty crazy next chapter for still the company most famous for raising a boatload of money during the ICO days. Nate, we're going to toss it to you for the next story. What do you got?
Yeah, so sticking with Peter Thiel, the company he founded, Palantir Technologies, is accepting Bitcoin for payments. His CFO, Dave Glazer, said in an earnings call on Tuesday. Palantir would be hardly the first big data company to put Bitcoin on there. They also mentioned putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet. And they're one of their main competitors, MicroStrategy, as we all know, has already put over $2 billion in Bitcoin. Tesla accepts Bitcoin and has invested $1.5 billion in it. So kind of in this theme with companies putting Bitcoin into treasury, using putting their excess cash, in a low interest rate environment, putting that excess cash into Bitcoin so that it's liquid, they can pull it out quickly, but they're also earning high yield. So I was curious to know what you guys think, Palantir, of them getting into the space, accepting Bitcoin for payments, thinking about putting it on their balance sheet. And do you guys think that they're going to go as long as MicroStrategy has?
Going to go as long as MicroStrategy. Well, I don't know. Is anyone going to be as...
I don't think anyone can go as long as MicroStrategy. Yeah. Michael Saylor is just the Giga Chad of going long on Bitcoin as a reserve asset.
Giga Chad.
Yeah, sorry.
Did you invent that term, Giga Chad?
I'm on crypto Twitter every once in a while, though, Naomi. I've seen it used. Okay. But yeah, so I mean, this is all still perspective. The Bitcoin payments thing is definitely notable that that's in the works. But yeah, the Bitcoin as reserve asset investment still on the table, or like we're thinking about it, we're discussing it internally. So just to be clear on that one, I don't know. I mean, it seems like more and more tech firms are taking this thing seriously. Peter Thiel, obviously being sort of a Silicon Valley titan, has invested in a number of crypto startups over the years. I think he invested directly in Bitcoin maybe in 2017 as well. And he was also like made some notable comments about sort of Bitcoin in the geopolitical arena. I want to throw it to Ben because he brought that up as we were talking about this before the show. Like Ben, what is that? How does that factor into now this news of the company of which he's still chairman?
Yeah, there was just all the ancillary noise around this made me focus much more on the company and kind of its history and also Peter Thiel's involvement than maybe the idea of the investment or the payments itself. Like Zach, like you said, they are a tech firm, they're a data firm. And so this makes a lot of sense in some ways in terms of payment. They're probably comfortable with that more so than say like, I don't know, Kroger or a grocery store or something. But Peter Thiel, I think maybe a month ago was talking about how Bitcoin could be a weapon for the Chinese and all this other kind of noise. So I thought it was really notable that Palantir, a company he co-founded as a co-chairman of, though he's been somewhat, a little bit distant from the company for a bit now, kind of doubled down on this and said, hey, we might invest in this and we are also going to be accepting payments in it. That being said, if we're looking at MicroStrategy, if we're looking at Tesla, I think it's really important to point out that like Palantir has a long history of using their sort of data analytics software with like law enforcement, with governments. They had a hand in helping the NSA develop their huge global dragnet previously. And there's been a lot of reporting about just the granular ways that their data is pitched to and used by police departments, for example, the LAPD, it can really, more or less using tech bias enforce like over policing in certain areas with a disproportionate outcomes on like Black and brown people. So, that was way more what I was thinking about when I heard this, because I think when we're talking about sort of, these sort of free flowing aspect of crypto and things like that, and certainly there are like surveillance apparatuses built out to observe Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, I had a hard time getting over this. And so I'm going to be watching this kind of closely. And granted, Palantir has been trying to move away from that previous narrative. But yeah, it gave me a little bit of pause, a little bit of a side eye, but Nate, I'll toss back to you.
Yeah, no, Ben, I feel like maybe part of Thiel's kind of feeling here is maybe this will make Bitcoin more U.S. focused or whatnot, because his complaint, I think, at that earlier about China was that there were that Bitcoin was there were so many Bitcoin miners and whatnot in China. So he was worried that it would if Bitcoin replaced the dollar. But it's interesting to kind of think about this in terms of the low interest rate environment. And if there's a ton of companies that begin to put Bitcoin into their treasury, at what point does Bitcoin become like a systemic risk? At what point do regulators begin to look at it like that? But Naomi, curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I'll add to that because I think his comments about Bitcoin and China and all of that were in a larger context of what is going to be a threat to the US dollar. So is the yuan going to be a threat to the US dollar? And if we're conceding that that might be a threat, well, then obviously you have to consider that Bitcoin might be a threat as well. Anything that is going to, take away some of the predominance of the US dollar. But Thiel, I'm torn on because, Ben, I hear your points. And I'm not a fan of Palantir and the data collection and all those policies. On the other side of things like 0 to 1 was hugely influential on me. Like, I think Thiel is a really great thinker, and he's just such an incredible entrepreneur. So, on the one hand, it's like I kind of like him, but, I don't like his protectionist policies and I don't like Palantir. So it's like, I don't know. I mean, obviously more people getting into Bitcoin, I think that's awesome as a general note. I don't know. I'm so torn. I've got to figure out where I stand on Thiel because it's not like me to kind of equivocate and, but it's a complex situation. So.
All right. Well, we're going to get more complex. We're going to get meta after the break. After the break, we're going to talk about an NFT of the definition of NFTs. Stick with us. It's the Hash. Hope you're having a good Tuesday. See ya.
We are witnessing the greatest paradigm shift in finance in modern history. Join thousands of newsmakers and influencers talking the future of money at Consensus by CoinDesk. A live virtual experience of leaders, changemakers, virtual reality meetups, keynotes from Ray Dalio, Gary Vaynerchuk, and much more. Get an up-close look at the boom in crypto, the surge of institutional investment in Bitcoin, NFT mania, the breakneck innovation in decentralized finance, and the coming disruption from central bank digital currencies. Join us May 24th to May 27th for Consensus by CoinDesk.
Welcome back to The Hash, everyone, and we're going to head over to China and see what's going on with their central bank digital currency, the digital yuan. So there's a new digital yuan wallet that will apparently require users' biometric information in order to enable payments. So China's I'm going to pronounce this wrong. I'm so sorry. Chuchen Dragon, a maker of high-end smart cards. They're planning on making a card-based wallet for the digital yuan. You have a big race in China. Everyone is building out technology around this digital yuan at the moment. They're one of the companies, and they're incorporating fingerprint identification technology. Obviously, this is striking a nerve with a lot of privacy advocates out there. And people say that CBDCs in general may provide central banks with a much more efficient way to collect data from individuals. If you connect that with biometrics, I don't know. I want to toss this to Ben and just get your thoughts on this general direction of central bank digital currencies and tracking and surveillance and all of that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, my thought here was interesting because it's really unclear from the situation right now, and I believe this might be the case, that the central bank of China was not involved in kind of soliciting this card, right? They weren't involved. This was kind of an external vendor that's worked previously with the country saying, hey, we want to offer this up. Here's our high-end smart card. So it's a little bit unclear who's driving this and what the motivations are. I think the collection of biometric data generally is problematic. I think that's had sort of a long history of being used for various purposes in China, particularly in regards to the Uyghur population. And so anything that sort of forces you to give up biometric data, I think is challenging. We need a lot more questions about how that would be protected or anything like that. So this is maybe just another element of this larger sort of apparatus of data collection that we see, not just in China, but across the world, right? We, use facial recognition for a ton of things in the US, like getting on planes, like other stuff, like it's pitched as convenience. But again, there's more questions than answers that come out of all of this. In terms of the CBDCs generally, this is the whole pitch, right? It's the convenient version of digital cash, et cetera, and China's really leading the way with it. It's a really interesting test case. The US is, to the, not skepticism, but I want to say to maybe some people's, hesitations, they're dragging their feet. And, we've not really defined clear policies around what ours would look like. It's really also being dragged into this geopolitical arena we were talking about, where Jerome Powell has just said, okay, well, ours is going to be more private than China. And that's maybe the extent of it. There's not a lot of clear lines. So there's still a lot to unpack here. And to me, just where this business relationship and who is driving it is going to be the interesting stuff that I'll keep following.
Yeah. Jen, what are your thoughts? I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, this story kind of highlighted for me this balance between security and privacy. I can understand the security reason for having the need for biometric data on these cards, but then there is a real privacy concern. And so I just kind of I had a really hard time wrapping my head around this. And I know, Naomi, that you probably have thoughts on it. And I just saw your hands go up. So when we think about security and privacy, do these two things go hand in hand? And is it just a delicate balance that we're going to have to figure out as we move forward?
So I think it was Jacob Appelbaum who famously said, security is a function of privacy, right? Because if you start eliminating people's privacy, it degrades their security considerably. And so that's why so many people are pushing back on all of this financial surveillance that's going on, et cetera. And Ben, when you're talking about Jerome Powell saying, yeah, ours will be more private, we have no details about that, but rest assured, it's this whole debate across the world about how these things are going to be implemented. You had a couple of months ago, Europe had this poll where the citizens what's most important to you in terms of a central bank digital currency, and they overwhelmingly said privacy. And so it is something that people want, but governments traditionally and historically have not wanted to give people that. They're all about control and getting as much data as possible. So, I'm not optimistic about the future of central bank digital currencies, and I'm definitely not optimistic about what China's doing. But also it's important to kind of look at what China's doing, and we sometimes get lost in the details, or we think, well, China's doing it and that's bad, or we can conceptualize it because it's the other. We don't realize that the US government is doing all the same things, but we just don't think about it in those terms. So I think it's good to kind of keep that in mind and watch what, the government where we live is actually doing as well with regards to, invading people's privacy. They're always going to pitch it in a certain narrative, but it's important to just kind of peer through the curtains and see what's actually going on. But Nate, did I see your hand go up?
Yeah, Naomi, I agree because it wasn't, was it like last year or something that Larry Summers had told CoinDesk that he's like one of the issues with money at the moment is that it's too private and whatnot. So there's definitely a faction within economics that very much looks at, CBDCs as like a way to be able to pursue people who might be tax dodging or whatnot, but also but without really thinking about the after effects of that. I'm also curious just as to the how the Chinese central bank is going to actually, like, what part of the bank is actually going to be looking at that biometric data or housing that data or whatnot. There's only so much, so many different so much staff that these central banks have. So I'm wondering how they're going to take that on, or if the government's going to help.
Yeah, and so I want to jump in here briefly, and then I'll dive into a story I brought to the table. But, maybe in defense of this, it's a little unclear whether the data would be stored locally on the card and whether it would just be kind of a trigger that would be used to authorize a payment. It wouldn't be sent to a third party or the cloud or something like that. And additionally, there are some CBDCs. I've been looking at a couple different reports that are looking at incorporating things like zero knowledge proofs and other cryptographic elements that could offer more privacy in this regard. And I think that's interesting to point out because it shows the ways, like what the benefits of cryptocurrencies might have on the larger financial system when it comes to privacy. So it's still an open question, right? Nothing is closed yet. And I think it's one we're going to continue to see come up here on the show. But shifting to a slightly different area of news, according to a report released today from Motherboard, the fintech giant Plaid was paying people for their employer payroll logins. Now, Plaid is an interesting company. It services a number of financial companies, so Robinhood, Venmo, Coinbase. They kind of provide the API by which to connect your bank account to these other applications. And it's a really, really interesting story because, Plaid said, we're doing this for a kind of internal pilot purpose. It seems they paid about 12 people, to access these credentials. That being said, it's really unclear, and Motherboard asked again and again and again, whether the employers of these people actually knew that they were giving up these credentials. And there is a chance that Plaid has run afoul of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, because if the employers didn't know and didn't give Plaid permission to access their servers, that's a really big issue. So, Naomi, I want to toss this over to you for some initial thoughts on the story.
Yeah, I thought this was such an interesting story because the way it's being framed is that, employees were offered money and decided voluntarily whether or not to give over their information, and then Plaid used those credentials. The issue is that if you work for a larger corporation, they don't necessarily have the right to give over their own employee login that even just accesses their own data, right? So there are lots of corporations who will run like phishing attack seminars and say, like, don't ever give over, login. Like, they're very careful with these things. And so for an employee to then turn around and, in return for money, give that over is interesting. But what's most interesting is that they're blaming Plaid for that and not the employee who gave over their credentials. They're saying, like, because Plaid asked for it, they're in the wrong here. They're guilty of hacking. I thought that was very interesting, and I don't agree with it. I think that the individual should be held accountable for their actions. But it was just an interesting way of framing this and suggesting that they could be in violation of certain hacking laws. But Ben, like, what were your thoughts on the culpability aspect there?
Yeah, I guess I'm surprised by that. So Plaid's framing this as, this was the only people they sort of solicited were, friends and family members of current Plaid employees, which is also kind of interesting.
This doesn't make it okay, though.
No. I think it's a weird way to say, like, it was like a close-knit thing. Like, it was only people we knew, like, don't worry, with no mention of who those other individuals worked for. Naomi, I kind of disagree with your framing on that one. I think it's maybe interesting, but I do think, like, if a company's coming to you saying, like, hey, and Plaid says, like, this checked out with their legal department and is soliciting things from you and saying, we will give you $500, that's a pretty, not I want to say compelling pitch. It's definitely not something I would do, but I think it's unfair to place the blame squarely on the employees. That being said, the employees could certainly have in their contract, and the article gets at this, a clause that says do not share your information with outside parties in this regard. So they could certainly be found in violation of their own contracts, but under the larger CFAA, kind of law, the onus would be on Plaid as sort of the organizer and solicitor in this regard. But Nate, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, there's some good kind of some of the history around Plaid is interesting in that they have become like the main data aggregator between banks and fintech apps. And these data aggregators popped up, I'd say like a decade ago. And they were there because our US banks are very competitive. They don't want to share data with each other and whatnot. They don't want other banks to, scoop up their customers or offer them loans or other financial products. And so these data aggregators came in, and there was this whole battle between banks and data aggregators because data aggregators would be like, look, if you want your customers to have access to all these apps, you have to use us. But then also the banks would have these, internal wars with how they were accessing the data or whatnot, and then shut down the data aggregator on a given day. So, a bunch of, Wells Fargo customers would just randomly lose access to Mint or Robinhood or whatever. So it's something that I think Plaid as a company has struggled for a long time, is to try to figure out, at what level of kind of data aggregation is appropriate and how to fit in. So I do kind of, sympathize with trying to figure out all the laws, the rules and regulations here. I also don't, because they're a very, very wealthy company that is that's been the front runner for data aggregators for some time.
Almost acquired by Visa in a deal that fell through also, which is interesting. But yeah, I think Plaid is absolutely a crypto company. I mean, we talk about sort of fiat on-ramps to the crypto ecosystem. This is a big one. They are very entrenched in connecting many crypto apps to people's bank accounts so that they can funnel money into this ecosystem and invest in digital assets. So Plaid is certainly one to watch. Let's kick this over to Jen. Jen, what do we got for our last story of the day?
Okay, it's like an NFTception. So Merriam-Webster is auctioning an NFT on OpenSea. Bidding starts today. Zach, I know you've looked into the price, so I'm going to kick it off to you first, but I'm just going to explain what this NFT is. It's an animation of the definition of an NFT, which was recently added to the dictionary. And this is the definition: a unique digital identifier that cannot be copied, substituted, or subdivided, that is recorded in a blockchain and that is used to certify authenticity and ownership. So you could own the animated version of that. Zach, what's the bidding looking like on this?
I mean, it went up. I mean, I checked it and it was $17. Yep, that one says $17 right now. $41. This is a hot ticket, guys. You got to get on this quick. This is $41. This is, of course, without gas fees, which on the Ethereum network are probably higher than the price that you'd be paying for this particular NFT. But yeah, I mean, cool. Meta, everyone covered this. Not a lot of investor interest in buying this NFT at the moment. But hey, there's still a lot of time left, and it can be yours for the low, low price of $41 or 0.0105 Ether. Hey, thanks for updating that control room. Good work. Way to go. So anyway, thanks. Shout out. I don't know. I just think like it's interesting to see I think it's interesting to see the NFT headlines and then like the NFT like brass tacks. And I think this is a good opportunity to do that. But yeah, I don't know. I like it. It sort of has like the more you know, sort of like Reading Rainbow vibe to it a little bit.
It does.
Yeah, it reminds me of like Scholastic book fairs.
Yeah.
For some reason, I don't know.
Those were great book fairs.
Those were great.
Well, the winning bidder of the NFT will have a link to their profile attached to the definition. So some fame and notoriety could come with the bid, maybe, but I really think this is a great marketing exercise. When's the last time we spoke about the dictionary?
Are these the people who became like really sassy on Twitter, or was that another dictionary? Do you know what I'm talking about?
You know what? I think it was them.
Was that Merriam-Webster?
Yeah.
That was them? Okay, I'm not. They're going to drag us, so we need to...
Yeah, they're going to drag us. You know, it's always fascinating to me to see which NFTs get traction and which don't, because I have no idea why some get traction and some don't. Part of me just thinks that a bunch of it is just like money laundering. But, you know, like it just
Naomi,
so
I would
weird.
have never expected you to say that.
No, but I mean, it's just like I'm not like.
It's an expression of freedom, Naomi.
Yeah, I just like it's so confusing. And again, it goes back to the idea value is subjective, right? And some people, they're just not valuing the dictionary anymore. They're just not valuing, they don't care what an NFT is. They don't want to understand it. They don't want the definition of it. They just want something that's opaque and confusing, and they're happy with that. I don't know. It's just very strange to me to see all this press around this and no traction whatsoever.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. To me, it speaks to like sort of the splintering of like this larger idea of NFTs into all these different offshoots and stuff. And like people creating NFTs really speaking to like a core community. Like we've talked about some of the migrations to like the Flow blockchain, for example. And those are like very, very specifically targeted things. Like this, I could see, some word nerd absolutely like paying a bunch of ETH for this potentially. Like that'd be interesting. But like, they're pitching to a specific audience, right? Like, who bought Beeple like is not going to go buy, or who bought, the people thing at Christie's is not going to go to buy Merriam-Webster's NFT as well. Like there's different cachet behind these things. And so that's something that I feel like we're just going to see more and more of, is like maybe the overall price of like NFTs, and we don't see these huge buys, but they become like something more common and maybe more akin to like, collectible toys or like, I don't know, something like that than these huge valued items.
I think NFTs are just like beautifully human in that they don't make a ton of sense, right? They're like human and irrational, right? Like you speak to like traditional collecting communities, be it stamps, coins, like ticket stubs, I don't know, postcards.
Humans too are non-fungible, it's true.
Yeah,
are these
like
the
all
Beanie Babies of the digital world?
So it does suggest that there might be some like long tail value, right? Like we had the hype, it was exposed to a bunch of different people, and maybe like these sub communities of collectors will be like, okay, this is the standard for digital collectibles, and that's fine. That's fine. So word nerds, shout out to the word nerds. I hope that whichever word nerd is like most excited about this one, I hope they get it. And it could be Justin Sun ultimately. We don't know. There could be some overlap.
I kind of
you're taking a turn now.
I kind of want it. Like I don't have any NFTs, and
we can chip in.
I can afford this. I can afford to participate.
All right,
think about those gas fees though, because I tried to buy $10 worth of ETH yesterday, and it would have cost me $42 with fees. It was wild. So
yeah, I mean the gas fees. This is a great example. Like, okay, I'm a word nerd, and I'm like so hyped about the Merriam-Webster NFT, and I put my thing in, and my fee is double my bid. Mm-hmm. That to me is a user experience flaw that illuminates why so many other competing networks are trying to launch all these platforms, right? If they can do it, if they can do it for cheaper, there are security trade-offs with that, of course, but if they can do it for cheaper with less transaction fees, that word nerd who gets into the space for the first time may not be put off in the way that they would be with the fees.
If this were on Zilliqa, I'd probably buy it, but it's just really expensive gas fees right now. So it is what it is.
So it goes. All right. Well, we'll leave it there for today. This has been a good one. Thanks, Hash Gang. Thanks, Nate, for filling in for Will today. You did well. You did well, kid. Jen, Ben, as always, killing it. Naomi, strong. Very strong performance today. We're going to be back again.
You were great too.
Yes. Show Raider. Room Raider? Show Raider. I don't know. What do you think? But anyway, we'll be back again tomorrow. We'll do it again, and we appreciate you sticking with us. CoinDesk TV, there's more great stuff on later today, 3 p.m. Eastern, all about Bitcoin. And then tomorrow morning, check out First Mover at 9 a.m. Eastern. I'm Zack Seward, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow, I think. All right, cool. Bye, everybody.
Cheers, you word nerds.
Bye.